Joining us now is Ian Bremmer. He's the president and founder of Eurasia Group and GZERO Media. Ian, it's nice to see you. I'm wondering, as you look at kind of this rocky start that these talks have had, what do you think the biggest priorities for the U.S. need to be? And can they get done everything they want to get done, not only in those 14 points, but we heard Vice President J.D. Vance talking this week and talking about how the end goal seems to far surpass what's on that paper. Can they get there at any point, do you think, if the MOU is the starting point?
No, and I'm not sure Trump really cares, to be honest with you. I mean, his back was against the wall. You heard that the United States faced economic catastrophe, and he didn't want to be Herbert Hoover if they didn't end the blockade. That is certainly my understanding of where they were, but it was very interesting to hear Trump admit that, because it shows a lot of leverage on the part of the Iranians, just how much the United States does not want to return to military conflict, just how important it was for this off-ramp to be taken by President Trump. Now, this war has completely failed in terms of being able to accomplish any of the war goals that President Trump put to the American people back when he launched the strikes on Iran 4 months ago. And I think he wants to put this behind him. I think he wants Iran out of the headlines. It took years for the Obama administration to negotiate the original Iranian nuclear deal, the JCPOA. Trump would want the nuclear agreement to be substantially tougher than that, and he has considerably less capacity to force the Iranians to the table to accept it. Not to mention the fact, as we just saw from Israel, that the ability to undermine this agreement just by starting fighting again with Hezbollah and Lebanon, which is part of the memorandum, but which the United States has no jurisdiction over. So, I mean, it's 60 days. Trump has already said that that's a soft, not a hard deadline. It'll be extended. I'm sure there's going to be continued engagement and negotiations between the U.S. and Iran. But as the strait is reopened, as the ceasefire continues to hold, that is going to be sufficient for Trump to move on to Cuba, move on to the Western Hemisphere, talk about some things that are much more positive for him than Iran, which has been the biggest failure of his administration by a very long margin.
Ian, I want to stick with Israel if I could. And the president sat down with Axios in recent hours, talked to them about the status of these negotiations and what's happening in the Middle East broadly. Let's take a listen to what he had to say in that interview.
If it weren't for Donald Trump, Israel would have been eviscerated.
Your relationship with Netanyahu's...
It's good, but we have to keep him a little bit sane.
Are you going to be able to control Israel from attacking Lebanon?
Yeah, I will be. I mean,
How?
I wonder. They have a lot of respect for me, and they do as I say.
Ian, I want to ask you about Israel not being party to this memo of understanding, which we knew about kind of going into it before it was signed. But of course, going back to February, this was a war that was launched by the U.S. in concert with Israel. So as you look to some signs of progress, the potential for progress here in these negotiations, it seems, to my mind at least, very problematic that one of the parties to the initial start of this war is not party to that memo of understanding. Do you agree?
Of course. I mean, again, there was no way that the United States could have gotten the Israelis to sign on, despite the fact that Trump says that Israel does what he says. They're a sovereign country. Hezbollah does more of what Iran says, because Hezbollah is operationally controlled in terms of military decisions by the Iranians. That is not true of Israel, which is not only a sovereign state, but also has a prime minister facing elections in October with a very restive Israeli population in the country's north that has been facing lots of these strikes from Lebanon, from Hezbollah. Now, Israel presently is occupying a significant piece of southern Lebanon, but they don't control all the territory that they would need to feel comfortable about that occupation. And as a consequence, they're going to continue to fight. Furthermore, Lebanon and Hezbollah, they want the Israelis out of that territory that Israel has no interest interested in moving away from. So the likelihood that we see ongoing strikes in the coming months as Israel's elections are coming up is, I would say, virtually certain. It's not 50%, it's more like 90 or 95. And if the Iranians wish to use that to delay, to extend and pretend, as we say, their engagement in these nuclear talks, it is certainly within their right to do so. So, look, the other fact is that there are a lot of other countries that aren't signatories of this agreement. None of the Gulf states are signatories of this agreement, but they're going to want to engage directly with Iran to figure out how they can ensure that they don't get attacked by Iran going forward and that they can use the strait going forward. So too the Chinese, so too the Indians, so too the Europeans, all of whom have a stake in stability, all of whom have a stake in engaging with Iran, none of whom are going to be negotiating directly with the Americans on this 60-day deal. So a lot of the action that we're going to see in terms of Iranian diplomacy in the coming months is not going to be dictated by J.D. Vance or Jared Kushner or Steve Witkoff. It's going to be dictated in Doha and in Abu Dhabi and in Riyadh and by the Chinese and the Europeans and the Indians. And that, I think, shows just how much leverage the Iranians have and shows why I have so little confidence that you're going to get an ultimate agreement on the disposition of Iran's enriched uranium stockpiles and their willingness to limit their uranium enrichment going forward.
We want to pick up on nuclear, but before we do, I do want to ask you about another glaring omission from these 15 points, and that is nowhere in there does it talk about the ballistic weapons program, which, as you mentioned, the Gulf allies, obviously that's what they are incredibly concerned about because those are the weapons used to hit Dubai, Abu Dhabi, you know, everyone in the region. And the president was asked about that very issue at the G7 and had a pretty surprising response.
If other countries have them, it's a little bit unfair for them not to have some. A ballistic missile is not the same thing as what we're talking about when we talk nuclear. But if Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and they all have some, I would say in relative proportion, I think it's okay. That's what I mean.
Now, J.D. Vance was also asked about those remarks and the program in general, and his argument was the U.S. has done a lot to take out the missile launchers, which he said, you know, it's not about the bullets, it's about the thing that fires them. But what is your assessment of the capacity of Iran's ballistic weapons program and what can be done to assess that threat, as well as the threat of Iranian proxies, which is what people in the region, U.S. allies in the region, are really concerned about?
Well, it turns out that Trump's assessment of what he thought he could get out of Iran and what was and what was not acceptable was significantly greater when he thought he was winning the war. And when it appeared clear that he wasn't winning the war, that he couldn't achieve his outcomes militarily, that the Iranians were not going to capitulate or engage in full surrender, as he told American allies and the American public that they were about to in the first weeks of the war, then suddenly his war goals changed. And what was acceptable from Iran changed. We saw that in terms of Trump saying suddenly that they could have ballistic missiles. He wasn't saying that at the beginning. Trump saying that this new regime is pragmatic and that he can engage with them. He was saying that that was not the case at the beginning. He was going to rescue the Iranian people. He would choose the new supreme leader. Obviously not happening. Just in the last 2 days, he said that the frozen assets are Iranian money. Why would we, the Americans, steal Iranian money? That wasn't what he was saying a few weeks ago. It wasn't what he was saying a few months ago. On literally every issue being demanded by President Trump in the early stages of the war, he has backtracked, he has flip-flopped, he has backed down. And in that regard, this war's outcome is very much like Trump's effort with the Chinese a year ago, April, where he was going to force complete capitulation on a smaller, weaker Chinese economy by hitting them very hard with American tariffs. Turned out the Chinese were capable of taking that pain and hitting back the Americans hard, so much so that the U.S. would have been driven into a catastrophe economically. A lot of their companies would have been shut down by the absence of critical minerals and rare earths. So what did the U.S. do? They backed down against the Chinese. Trump treated the Chinese with much more caution, much more flatteringly, much more willing to find a compromise as opposed to demand a set of unilateral requirements that China was never going to accept. That is exactly what has happened with Iran, except the consequences for the United States are much greater, much more embarrassing. And Iran, of course, is a much smaller country, a much clearer enemy and adversary of the United States and of its closest ally, at least thus far, in the Middle East, Israel. So that's why Trump has changed his view on the ballistic missiles. And you're right, him saying that Iran should be able to have ballistic missiles is surprising, but it's only surprising when you view it by itself. It's not surprising when you view it in the context of everything else Trump has been saying about all the other demands that he used to have of the Iranian regime, and somehow those demands no longer matter now that Trump needs an off-ramp.
Ian, very quickly here, the prelude to this war, of course, were these talks that the Omanis were intermediaries to. And now we have Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, the same principals traveling to Switzerland, presumably in the coming hours to engage in these talks once again. Does that engender any optimism in you? Yes, they've been to Oak Ridge. They've been traveling around eastern Tennessee trying to develop some nuclear expertise here. Do you think these two men, perhaps in concert with the vice president, have the technical manpower at their disposal to be able to kind of get through this 60-day period and make tangible progress when it comes to the nuclear file?
Progress, maybe there'll be some signs over the coming weeks or months that the talks are constructive, but that's very different. There's been tangible signs of progress over the past several months, and then Trump says, "I'm going to destroy your civilization," or "I'm going to attack your energy infrastructure. I'm going to blow you up like you've never seen before. No more Mr. Nice Guy. I know I already killed your supreme leader, but no more Mr. Nice Guy." I'm sure there will be some perspective on progress. What I'm saying is I would bet a great deal that there will not be a successful executed nuclear deal between the Americans and the Iranians. I think that Iran is going to focus much more on the money that they can extract together with Oman from the Gulf states, from other countries that wish to have continued access through the strait. And it won't be a toll, as you suggested earlier before we started talking. It'll be insurance. It'll be, some form of authority for their responsibility over geography that they, of course, still have. But ultimately, I do not expect that all of Iran's enriched uranium stockpiles will be diluted or turned over, nor do I expect that there will be an implemented, inspected deal that prevents them from enriching uranium at beyond civilian levels. I hope I'm wrong about that. I would love to be wrong about that. I don't expect that I'm wrong about that.